Recently, I've been hearing a lot of dangerous rhetoric from free market extremists. They want deregulation. They want less central economic planning and fewer economic decisions being guided by experts. And frankly, I don't think people have really considered the consequences. Advocates of economic freedom spend a lot of time talking about the benefits: lower prices, more innovation, more competition, greater choice, blah, blah, blah. But they rarely discuss the costs. Today, I want to discuss some of the safeguards we could lose. For example, under a free market, there wouldn't be a public transportation system as we know it. Instead of transit systems being designed through political processes and funded through taxation, transportation providers would actually have to persuade customers voluntarily. Think about how horrible that would be. Companies would have to continuously discover where people actually want to go, which services people value most, and whether they're using scarce resources efficiently. If they get it wrong, labor, capital, and resources are reallocated towards people serving consumers better. That's an enormous amount of pressure to put on organizations. Right now, transportation systems can be guided through committees, planning boards, and political processes. Remove that insulation, and suddenly providers would be forced to satisfy consumers under the constant threat of economic reality. Terrifying. We could also lose free education. Instead of everyone paying for schools, whether they use them or not, people would be confronted more directly with the cost of education. Schools might suddenly have to compete with one another for students and families. Imagine parents asking questions like, why does this cost this much? Why are students learning less? Why are outcomes so poor? Why should I choose this institution over another one? I don't think educational institutions should have to endure that level of scrutiny. Constantly having to persuade people that you're providing value seems unnecessary. Education is far too important to be left vulnerable to something as unstable as consumer satisfaction. Much like pandering to consumers is beneath our doctors, which is why we can't have open competition for healthcare either. We'd also lose economic stability. Right now, a relatively small number of people influence interest rates and credit expansion. Under a free market, interest rates would reflect real savings rather than being carefully managed by experts. Imagine if low savings actually meant higher interest rates. The horror. Instead of experts guiding broad economic outcomes, millions of individuals would make decisions based on real prices and their own circumstances. I don't know about you, but that sounds dangerously democratic. Well, like the bad kind of democratic. Job security would also be threatened. Under a heavily administered system, governments can subsidize industries, shape labor markets, and protect certain firms from competition, and create structures that preserve existing arrangements. Under a free market, businesses would have to continuously satisfy consumers in order to survive. People might have to adapt to changing conditions. Some might start their own businesses, others might work independently. Entirely new industries might emerge that nobody predicted. That sort of uncertainty is deeply unsettling. There's something so comforting and warm about systems that forcibly preserve existing arrangements, even if preserving them comes with costs people can't even see. Even more alarming, a free market could change the way law enforcement works. Right now, we have systems where protection and enforcement are largely organized politically. Under a market system, institutions responsible for safety could face much stronger pressure to maintain trust and satisfy the people depending on them. Imagine the chaos. People might start asking dangerous questions like, are these policies actually reducing harm? Are incentives aligned correctly? Why am I paying for this? Do I have alternatives? Law enforcement institutions shouldn't have to concern themselves with consumer satisfaction. Their work is far too important for that. Imagine if organizations responsible for your safety had to convince you they were providing value rather than simply assuming it. That is nightmare fuel. Perhaps most concerning of all is safety. In a freer system, organizations would increasingly depend on reputation and voluntary trust instead of simply complying with rules established by political institutions. People might begin to ask questions like, does this actually work? Is this organization reliable? Who can I trust? You're expecting individuals to think about these things themselves constantly? No, no. People can't be expected to make these important decisions on their own. Choosing how their own resources are used and who they trust and which institutions they rely on is simply too much responsibility. Now, obviously, they can still be trusted to vote for people who will make decisions affecting millions of others, but their own lives? No, let's not get reckless. So yes, proponents of freer markets spend a lot of time discussing innovation and prosperity, but they rarely mention what we'd lose. Systems where costs are hidden, where incentives are often disconnected from consumers, and where decisions can be made by people insulated from the consequences of those decisions. We shouldn't throw those things away lightly. We spent a long time building them.